5 years.
5 years, yeah.
5 years since we first spoke to you. And you were the pilot for what is now the podcast.
Was that the first ever podcast?
Yeah, when we done it on Instagram Live.
Right.
We done 5 of them on Instagram Live to see if people wanted it.
We got up super early in the morning and you got up, you were at night time, so you had a beer and we had a
hanging out with
coffee.
a beer.
That's right, yeah.
And it was snowing. I remember distinctly that it was snowing.
Outside.
And it was scorching and you had a beer.
And we were like,
You're like, we got to come to Australia, and then you come here and you're like, oh, it's cold.
It's not
yeah, we
cold.
didn't come at the right time of the year, did we?
Yeah.
It's not cold, but yeah, it's cold for Australians maybe. The amount of people that have stopped us and been like, oh, it's a bit cold. I'm like, it's not.
Yeah,
But,
we'll be all right. We'll be all right. Don't worry about
We'll
it.
sort out. It'll be fine. Where are we? What are we doing?
We are in my humble little garage workshop in Ballarat. So regional Australia, about an hour west of Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And this is the Sawdust Bureau's third home?
Yeah, third home. I kind of moved in the first place I was this enormous wool store.
Mm-hmm.
So I had probably 4 different workshops where I sort of scaled up and up and up
Right.
within that workshop.
Right.
But yeah, third kind of permanent home.
How long have you been doing it full time now?
12 years.
12 years full time.
Yeah.
So you came to Melbourne 20 years ago,
Yep.
To study?
19. Yeah.
19 years ago to study.
Yep.
Architecture,
Yep.
practicing architect,
Yep.
got bored of how slow it was.
Yeah. I can't remember how much this we covered in the original podcast, but yeah. Worked as an architect for about 5 years. Didn't get the full burnout because I worked for a fairly responsible company. Like
Yeah, okay.
you weren't working stupid hours or anything,
Right.
but it was more just the process of it, and the pace was just too slow for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Like jobs getting held up in planning at a really nice house, get held up in planning, then the client was made redundant, end the project, and you're like, that was, nearly 2 years of my life and nothing to show for it.
Right.
So my wife and I went traveling and spent a year traveling around Africa, America, Mexico, and in Africa we're like, right, what are we going to do with our lives? I was like, all right, I'm gonna learn how to make furniture properly. I'd done a bit as part of my Masters of Architecture, but I'm like, yeah, I'm going to learn how to make furniture. And we arrived back to Melbourne and both went back to our exact same jobs. And you're like, it's like nothing happened. And then a friend of a friend was like, I've heard of this studio space going. I've got a friend who's sort of struggling to pay the rent. Do you want to go in halfers with him? So I went in halfers with him. He never showed up. He never paid his rent. So I just took over the space and that was the start of it. So a 3x3 meter studio.
3x3.
Yeah, small.
Pretty hard to make furniture on a 3x3.
It was, especially when one of my first commissions was a 3.2 meter bench. Yeah. So it was like having to do it propped up on the table saw and moving jointers and table saws, so that I was using the corridor space as in-feed and out-feed.
You just make it work.
You do make it work, but you don't really have any other choice.
No.
So yeah, scaled up from that to about 30 square meters and then about 70 square meters over 2 spaces, 80 square meters. And then moved out to Maribyrnong, which would have been the place where I did the last Instagram Live from. The Gunpowder magazine, which was cracking space. Like a little hidden pocket of Melbourne.
Yeah.
Heritage building, so it wasn't quite suited to other businesses, but for me it was perfect, It's just a tin shed. You couldn't insulate it, which obviously made summer pretty fun. Like it would get up 50 degrees in there. So there was a lot of days where you either had to come in super early and work, and you still have to schedule your day, do your glue ups and things before it's too hot.
Ah, right, of course.
Yeah. All glues and finishes and things would go off too quickly.
That's the one that had the train tracks, the bogey tracks right into it.
Yeah,
right?
so I was in the loading dock for the Gunpowder magazine. So it was before you could produce gunpowder in Australia.
Uh-huh.
So they had to buy it from the UK, come into the docks, up the canal, through my building, and then onto those little train tracks.
Yeah.
You can see it. I don't know whether that's on shop, but that's the little gunpowder trolley on the left-hand side.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I turned it into a workbench. And would be able to shift things. Yeah.
And how long were you in that one? That was like home for a while.
Yeah, nearly 6 years.
Okay.
So the problem that all makers have, like trying to get a long-term lease out of it, was nigh on impossible. It was government run, like a subsidiary that tried to get heritage buildings back in use.
Right.
So they were good landlords because they were kind of absent landlords a little bit.
Right.
So I wouldn't hear from them for a year, and then suddenly they'd be like, "Oh, we want to take a real estate tour of your, we're looking at putting a cafe into your space and things like that.
You're like, no.
So it was living on tenterhooks in the build up to COVID, and then obviously in Melbourne we had some pretty severe lockdowns.
You were saying COVID was like, Melbourne was like the most locked down city in the world, wasn't
It was wild, yeah. So that workshop was my sanity, you know. I was able to come out of home, be in my space, and it was like nothing had really changed. Apart from I didn't have anybody working with me at the time, which was usually I'd have a person working with me. So it was just full solo. But yeah, it was my proper sanity. And the fact that there were lockdowns meant that there was no interest in opening new cafes or anything like that.
Yeah, right.
So it kept me in the space for another couple of years. So I kind of, 2023, I kind of got the feeling that it was on the cards, that it was happening. So my wife and I had been talking about, you know, what we were going to do, whether I was going to just get into teaching or something, basically give up the workshop, give up my machinery, get into teaching, and or we move out of the city.
Right.
So
what was the reason for having that conversation?
Because it was just, commercial real estate was just getting impossible. It was like, if you wanted a wood shop, you've got to move to an industrial area, and the industrial areas in Melbourne are, you know, 50 minutes.
Yeah.
With no traffic. They can be an hour and a half in traffic, and you're working in just tilt up concrete workshops.
Not very inspiring, is it?
No, and like the fact that I'd grown my business in heritage buildings, and clients come to my space.
Yep.
And I share a bit of the story of where the piece is made, and I always felt that added value to a piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, there's a romance there, right?
So I wanted there to be a story in the space where I was making, and then a story within the pieces as well, and it was that kind of... So yeah, it was never something that I wanted to do, would be to live in the suburbs, work in an industrial estate, commute back to the suburbs. I was like, if I want to live in Melbourne, I want to live in the city and work in the city, and once that comes to an end, take me out.
Yeah.
So we were looking anywhere around regional Australia, like Tasmania, Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, and obviously on the fringes of Melbourne. And there's some beautiful areas, but problem, like there's, I don't know how familiar you guys are, but the bushfires and stuff that ripped through here in 2020, early 2020, were pretty severe. We had Black Saturday a few years before that in towns like Healesville and Marysville were absolutely decimated. Yeah. So it's not only the risk, but it's also, can you get insured for a house? What are you going to be paying for the premium?
Right.
You don't want to buy a house on the end of a one-way road, because the CFA, the fire authority, will not go in, because one way in, one way out is not enough for them, like in terms of risk management.
Of course, yeah.
And then there's pretty big hills by Australian standards around there, so getting a plot of land that was flat enough to accommodate a workshop, either an existing one or to allow me to build one, was just too hard. So we looked for over a year and a half probably, fairly seriously, going out every weekend with our two young kids, taking them around real estate inspections.
Really?
The stuff of nightmares. And then fairly late on in the whole experience, I saw a house in Buninyong, which is like a little township south of Ballarat. I loved the house. I loved the area. I took my wife up. She saw the house. She's like, nah, not really for me, but the area is quite nice. And then after that, I was like, right, locked in. We found an area.
Right.
It's close to, you know, a big regional city. Like easy train links to Melbourne. It's an hour and a quarter to drive. It's easy to get around. Like the stuff that I can do now as a business in like a matter of an hour, versus Melbourne, that would have taken me like 4 or 5 hours to do. Like,
really?
If I want to do a run to the tip, get rid of stuff, go to a tool shop, go to a timber yard or something like that. In Melbourne, I was having to like, that's, you know, 2/3 of a day is going to be given over to it. Whereas
you
here,
don't think about that, do you? Because you think when you're in population and when you're in dense cities, all this is easier because it's theoretically closer.
Yeah, you think there's more infrastructure. And, so that was one of the reasons for Ballarat. Like, it's flatter. So we're now on, we'd looked at smaller properties. Like we were looking at about 4,000 to 5,000 square meters was the ideal. You know, you could put a workshop on it, and if you had a neighbour, it's not going to bother them during daylight hours. But we've ended up on 8 acres of pancake flat land.
Yes, amazing land.
Kangaroos, birds. You know, if you guys are up early enough tomorrow morning,
Yes.
you'll see them. But yeah, it's the feeling of living out in the bush, living next door to a farm, but still being 10 minutes drive to a city, like a proper city with
It's so good.
culture, heritage, arts. Like you guys have been to the art gallery, the Rare Trades Centre being 5 minutes.
That's such
drive.
a place.
Like
That is such a place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an odd spot, isn't it? Because you're fully in the middle of general population, and then you turn off down that road, and then the road just turns to dirt, and then you keep driving for 10 more minutes, and you're at your place.
Yeah.
Like it's
best of both worlds, I say.
it's worlds
It's just
apart.
what we were looking for, you know. And our first month here, it felt like we were living in an Airbnb. It's like, oh, when do we have to move back to Melbourne?
Oh, really?
And we're like, oh God, this is home.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So
Good feeling.
it was a baptism of fire. Like we moved in January. It was a very hot, dry summer here.
Right.
So there were bushfires, you know, 20k away on the other side of Ballarat.
That's not that far for the size of those
Not
fires,
that far. I mean, the city will usually act as some kind of buffer, and like in the event of a big fire going through, God forbid. But my wife was at work, kids were at daycare. I was doing some renovation stuff around the house. I looked out the window and it was like a sunset at midday. Like the light, I was like, there's something weird going on here. And I rang my wife and I'm like, you know, should I maybe be checking fires? And I got on the Vic Emergency app, is what you check bushfires with here and stuff. And it showed nothing. And then it started getting like more and more orange. And I'm like, no, there's definitely something going on. So I drove up to the top of the hill and you see plumes of smoke, huge plumes of smoke coming up from the other side of Ballarat. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, I'll pack a box just in case we need to leave. Because there was always a thing here in Australia, you know, do you defend your home or do you get out? And I was like, get me out of there. So packed a box and was ready to go. Unfortunately, like we had embers come down, like it was raining charred leaves.
Really?
Like literally like sleet.
So it was close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just put your hands out and you're getting burnt leaves land in your hands from 20, 30k away. So just like tornadoes up into the atmosphere and falling down. So it was a good early warning of country life and what to do, you know, get up on your roof, fill the gutters, clean your gutters regularly, all that kind of stuff, and have a box and be ready to go. But like I'm loving life in regional Australia. Like as you guys would have seen over the past few days, like Ballarat would have had a reputation as being a fairly, obviously the mining and stuff, a fairly working class city for the past 200 years or whatever, or 150 years. But now it's definitely picked up a lot of the vibe of Melbourne. A lot of the people that I know that grew up in Ballarat obviously moved to Melbourne, had families, and now they're coming back with kids and bringing their skills, bringing their salaries. So there's stuff happening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
It feels like it's, Kate and I were talking about this the other day, it feels like if we had to come back in 5 years, it's going to be this like wild creative city.
Yeah, I
Some
hope
of the
so.
people we've met that are behind the scenes doing the creative stuff, and the amount of makers that we've dropped in on, and then obviously you've got the Rare Trade Centre up there as well, and there's a lot going into it.
Yeah.
It feels like a good place to be for a maker.
It does. And I came here without really knowing that. Like, I didn't really have any maker connections. I didn't have any friends in the area. Like, it was a bit of a shot in the dark for us. An architect friend of mine had sort of looped us in, who had done a bit of work on Jess Wooten's house.
Right.
So he was like, oh, you need to catch up with those guys. And I was just in the full mindset of, I need to get the house moved, I need to get the workshop set up, and then I'll do all the network building and stuff. And I was like, this is the week to do it. And of course I didn't do it. And then at the end of the week, I got a phone call from Angela and Amelia from Creative Ballarat. And they're like, we're running this exhibition, we'd love you to be part of it. And I get calls like that all the time. And it's usually, you know, it's going to be a 3x4 meter stand. It's going to cost you $6,000. The signage is going to cost you an additional $1,000. Like if you want to be in the marketing, there's another $1,500. And I was waiting for, okay, give me the full sales pitch. Like how's this run? And they're like, no, we're a council funded thing, and we're here to promote local makers and encourage like a proper creative city. I was like, yeah, but hang on, what's the catch? Like, what's the commission?
There's
what
always
do you
a
charge?
catch, right?
There's always a catch.
Yeah.
I was like, what's the commission? No, we don't take any commission on your work. I was like, okay, I'm in. And as an initial experience, like having been here 4 or 5 months, like I feel as though I've built networks with council, arts departments, and other makers that would have taken me 10 years to build in Melbourne. And even I had mixed relationships with councils in Melbourne. Obviously, coming through architecture, the planning department ones were mostly negative.
Yeah.
But then my first workshop in Kensington fell within the City of Melbourne council boundary, right on the edge. So I probably went through it in the last podcast, but I applied for a City of Melbourne business grant. I was like, right, even if they give me like 10%, like I'll get a table saw out of it, you know, it'll be something. And they gave me the full grant amount. And I was like, right, called my boss and quit my job the next day.
Nice.
So without City of Melbourne, I would have never have got that.
Mm-hmm.
But then a year later, or maybe 2 years later, they're approving the rezoning of where my workshop was to be mixed use. Right. So then, of course, you're going to get developers coming in and building apartments there, which is just happening everywhere in Melbourne and Adelaide and Sydney. Like
every city across the world. I was going to say across the country, certainly across the UK. But it does feel like these regional places are where makers are going to be able to make their living. Yep.
And it's a funny, like one of the last things that I did in Melbourne was a panel talk at the M Pavilion. And it was talking about creative reuse of heritage buildings and how important it is, like the fabric of memory and the use of these spaces. And I'm like, well, I feel as though it's come to an end. Like, I don't think that it's accessible anymore in Melbourne in terms of running a long-term sustainable business out of it. It's too hard.
Really?
So I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such a big growth in regional areas, not only in Victoria, but in Tasmania and New South Wales. Yep. Makers live in the regions and service the cities. It's probably a lot to do with COVID as well. Like, I think buying habits have obviously changed. You know, before COVID, I don't think I really sold much online. I think my online thing was my folio and my first introduction to clients a lot of the time. But then they'd want to come into the workshop and see timber samples and see finished pieces and things. So I'd keep small amounts of stock. And then after COVID, people would just go online and just go buy. Yeah. So why do you need to be in that city anymore?
And that's a big shift for high-end furniture at the price that you rightfully charge.
Yeah. So then, as much as that heritage story of, you know, working in a beautiful, inspiring space, does that matter anymore? Or can I be anywhere?
Or can you tell that story differently?
Yeah. So I was then I've always only used Australian timbers. So I want my brand to be part of the land that it's based in. So Indigenous history in Australia obviously has its massive flaws and stuff with colonialism, but I wanted my brand to represent the place where the trees grew.
Yep.
So then surely being based out in the countryside is kind of nearly more apt. Like, you know?
Yeah.
Surrounded by native species, messmates and
I'd agree.
Stringy barks and all those kind of things. So the idea of the inspiration of working around the environment, which I actually got in Maribyrnong where I was, like you guys would have seen photos of the doors open and looking down the canal and the bird life and all that. Had I lost that, I'm ending up in an industrial estate. So
right. So the important bit there is that was the 1 in a million chance in that city. Yeah. There wasn't, if you went out there wasn't another one of them to go in.
It was totally bizarre.
That was the little sort of diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
Whereas here you've got your own space.
Yeah.
As you say, you can work whenever you want.
Yeah.
Which is also really important, that even everything you've talked about there, getting into this space that a lot of people I don't think realise when they're buying from independent makers is you move and shop, or you going to an exhibition, or you going to do that's time you're not selling or making the stuff to sell.
Yeah, sunk costs.
Yeah, it's all sunk costs, and there's months of them in a year that you're not earning.
Yeah.
Which is a really hard thing to try and educate the general population on.
Yeah.
Because you've got big companies that if their people are out doing trade shows, they're still generating income, there's still sales happening, there's still all this happening in the background, but you are the one-man furniture maker.
Yeah.
So it's not about what you make every day, because you can't make that every day.
Yeah.
Financially, you cannot make that every day. There's multiple days where you're below the line, right?
Yeah. You guys are the same, like, you know?
Yeah, we're exactly
the
the
amount
same.
of admin and marketing and stuff like that you have to take on as, you know, you're an independent person. So you kind of got to do it all unless you can afford to pay somebody else to do it. You're doing it yourself, but I find, especially from a maker's perspective, the difference of selling your stuff online, and I've always been transparent with pricing. Like, I've never tried to withhold it. I did have it always listed on my website, and I recently took it off midway through last year. Okay. And I put it into a folio that was accessible via a mailing list sign up. So you sign up to my mailing list, you can unsubscribe anytime, but that's going to get you access to my pricing folio. And I know that probably 30% of the signups are other furniture makers just looking at what my stuff's priced at. I want that. Yeah. Because I want them to price their stuff accordingly as well. Yeah. The second that somebody is, bottoming out the market and selling their stuff so they're working below minimum wage is ruining the industry for everyone.
That's what Steph was saying the other day, wasn't she?
Yeah. Steph's talked about this. Yeah. In fact, one of the really encouraging things about the last week, we've sat in on a lot of the UNESCO Creative Cities talks that Tara had organised, and there was guys from Jeonju in South Korea, right through to Taiwan, through to Monte Cristi, which was a phenomenal presentation. Then you've got South Africa, you've got loads of them, but one of the key sort of strings that ran through all of it is how do we educate makers to not go cheaper? Because then they're just, as you say, they're bottoming out the market. Yeah. It's almost like, how do you unionise it without having a union? How do you say, like, this is the rate for a furniture maker, this is the rate for a 5 to 10 year, this is the rate for a 10 year to 20 year plus furniture maker. Yeah. And that's the hourly rate you have to stick to. Pretty much.
But that's why I've always said transparency is the best, right? Like, I don't feel uncomfortable talking about price. And with clients as well, like, the first question I'll ask, especially if they're looking at bespoke work.
What's your budget?
What's your budget?
Yeah.
You don't go and buy a car without having, like, I want to spend 25 grand on a car. You don't go to a car yard without that figure in mind. So why would you go to a custom furniture maker or an artist without a figure in mind? So I'll always design to a budget.
Right.
They want me to work for them. I'll charge them a bespoke design fee. If they go ahead with the commission, I'll refund 50% of that design fee, and it's theirs. They can do whatever they want with it.
Right, okay.
If they don't want me to make it, they can have somebody else to make it. I'll sign over the IP, but I've been paid for my work.
Yeah.
But I've always found that really important.
So you could do the design only if someone decided to get a manufacturer?
Yeah. So the same, like, if there's a client on the other side of the world who wants me to design, say, a 12 metre long massive boardroom table. Yeah. Obviously, the economics of me shifting it from Australia to the States, it doesn't stack up. It's a 40-foot
container with one table in it, right?
So the table might cost them 20 grand. The shipping of it might cost 20 grand. So it's nearly better for me that I can do the design and then they can get a local maker who's comfortable making somebody else's work. Yeah. And it's all legit, above board. Nothing's been knocked off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you recommend that maker? Or do you just let them find it?
I've only had it probably twice that it's happened. Like, I don't think I've ever actually had to... I don't think I've ever lost a job where I've done the design and somebody's like, I don't want to go ahead with it.
Yeah.
Like, once they've paid the fee and they're sort of locked into my idea, it's generally gone ahead. But I've had a couple in America that have done work for me before.
Right.
But most of the time I'll do it. And the Aussie dollar being worth nothing at the minute has meant that American clients were basically getting their shipping for free, compared to on the exchange rates 5 years ago.
That's quite an interesting way to do it, that more people could take on, isn't it? Especially for big pieces, like you say.
Yeah.
Does that come from your architecture background? Like a design fee, a this fee, a that. There's different stages of the project.
Architects are bad at charging themselves out as well. Like,
really?
They don't keep track of all their hours, because if they did, the budget blows out and then nobody uses architects anymore. I think it's the same as anybody in creative industries. It takes a long time to really value your work.
Yeah.
And people take the mick out of architects a bit and say, you're paying all this money for something. You end up, like, you can tell the difference between a house that's been designed by a building designer versus a house that's been designed by an architect.
Oh yeah, big time.
You can, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come into, that's what you're paying, that's the expertise you're paying for, right?
It's a long-term investment, Especially if people only have their savings in property, if that's, their nest egg for life. Like, you're protecting your investment by starting off well, the right way. And the same with art and furniture, You want to buy cheap, you're going to replace it in 5 to 10 years. Like, is that a good thing? It's not.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation that I think is becoming more prevalent now. But that's a whole conversation that needs to happen more. Like the buy well, buy once.
Yeah.
That needs a whole load of marketing spend behind it.
Yeah.
Because it's... I remember boots were my thing for a long time, despite the fact I scuff about in trainers now because we're travelling so much. But like buying good boots, in the last, like my first pair of good Red Wings, 5 years maybe? Wore them every single day.
Yeah.
They look like a completely different boot now.
Yeah.
Would I be able to get them resold and rewear them? Absolutely. Can I find someone anywhere near me that can resole them without shipping them away? And I just don't want to ship them. I've got this like burning feeling like if they go missing, that's... Because you can't replace them, they're 5 years worth. But to that point, buying well, how many pairs of like cheap boots could I have bought in 5 years?
Yeah.
How many cheap furniture? Like furniture gets wrecked.
It's just educating. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The furniture gets wrecked thing's an interesting, because like I don't use timber veneers. I can understand like sometimes the technical aspect of the piece. Like if you've got an enormous table, the weight of that table, it makes sense to like have it as a veneer on a substrate and hollow out the substrate. So that, but for me, a lot of my pieces are smaller, like coffee tables and things like that. And the idea that it can be constantly refinished, you know, in 40, 50 years time, it's literally just a matter of sand it, oil it, sand
like good flooring, like good original flooring, you could sand it.
Same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, also the idea of not trying to follow a particular trend, trying to create proper contemporary work that doesn't date. Like I think the second that other designers get transfixed on each other's work, it sort of starts to water down the whole thing. Like, you know, that Pinterest design thing. No offense, Pinterest, but I think you start to see too much of other people's work and you lose your own creativity.
Style and
like that bench was the first piece of furniture I designed. That's nearly 20 years old, 16, 17
and
years old.
It still looks great.
That's what I hope to achieve. But yeah.
And was that what you were looking at from the outset? Because it'd be really easy as a new furniture maker to look at what everything else that's out there and be like, that seems to be going well, I'm going to build something akin to that. Or was your outset do something different?
It was I was fortunate because I was I had my workshop and I had the backing of a full-time career at the time.
Right.
So a lot of the first projects I did, I wasn't relying on making money out of them. Now, to go back to that whole quoting thing of knowing what you should charge for something, when I say I wasn't making money out of them, I was still charging the client appropriately, but I couldn't make it fast enough. Right. So it was me trying to acquire the skills. So that Osberg bench, the bench that I'm talking about, that 3.2 meter long bench in a 3 meter long workshop, like I'd probably charge $8,000 or $9,000 for that as like a second or third commission that I'd ever done. But it was trying to work out, you know, it wasn't an optimized space, so of course it's going to take longer to build. But I've still charged the client. I've valued the piece, but I haven't got the setup to make it quick enough.
Right. But if you were to build that now for the same price, you would be profitable.
Well,
I know it was so long ago that inflation and all the rest of it.
Now the piece is probably nearly double.
Because of,
I think I would generally raise my prices on a 5 to 10 year basis as my skills are improving. And I feel there's more value in my work. Like clients come back and, you know, commission me to do extra pieces. Whereas I think the first 5 to 10 years of your career, you do need to price your work to sell. But beyond that, like you look at some makers like, I don't know, Joseph Walsh in Ireland, he does a lot of bent lamination stuff, crazy big glue lambs and bent lambs. Like he can basically name the price of what he wants and there's people waiting to pay it. So I think you find a sweet spot where your work's still selling, you're not having to mass produce it. I'm still able to make it myself. Like I don't have to have a team of 10 people making it because that's not why I got into furniture design. I didn't get into it to just run the business and do the designs and pass them off. I want to be on the tools.
Be hands-on.
And is that something you still want to be? Is that where you see yourself always being? You want to be the hand?
I think so. Like I've always, well, not always, but for most of the past 10 years, I've had interns working for me. Like literally one person a few days a week. So I'd structure my week around what tasks do I need them to do, anything that required a 2-person job. I'd obviously be right, that's happening on Monday morning,
right.
Then Monday afternoon they're going to do this. So I still see the value in that, and I like the fact that I'm educating somebody as well. I don't want somebody to come into me fully skilled. Mm-hmm. So most of my interns have not come from furniture backgrounds, maybe less than half. And now several of them are very successful furniture makers. So Vivian Wong, I don't know whether you've seen her stuff come up on Instagram. Brilliant maker.
Vivian Wong.
Yeah, she's had her stuff exhibited in London and Singapore and stuff. She was a ballerina into her, I don't know, mid-30s, and it's a fairly limited career. Like after ballet, what do you do? Do you get into set design? Do you teach ballet, or you production? So there's, for every group of 50 ballerinas that retire, there's 3 jobs. So the Australian Ballet actually had an amazing program where they nearly sponsor you to retrain in something.
That's awesome.
So they gave her money, she bought some tools, she did a class, she's like, oh yeah, I kind of like this. And then she set out to go, she worked with me and 2 other makers. So she'd have one day with me, one day with one, and learned different ways of doing things. Because in furniture everybody thinks there's one way of doing something. It's like, there's a million different ways to approach it. And you'd see, even just in terms of safety and things like that, how different makers approached machinery. So that's what I always recommend to young makers. Like, I think the idea of going to a design school is great if you can afford it and if you have the time to, but the reality is it's a tough industry, and the best thing you can do is learn from people that have been in the industry for a while.
What about you? Where did you learn it from?
I kind of did it the other way around.
Yeah.
My grandfather was an architect, a furniture maker, and a builder. So he was in New Zealand while I grew up in Ireland, but like we'd go over to New Zealand every year or 2, and I'd spend winter there. So I'd have a winter in Ireland and a winter in New Zealand, which is pretty grim. But I'd spend time in his workshop, always making things, like not necessarily furniture, but he would teach the process of making things like, I don't know, bent balsa wood planes, like World War II planes and things like that. Made the way that the actual planes would have been made.
Cool.
Bent wooden stringers and things. We'd tie fishing flies and stuff. So it was always about learning how to take an idea and then make a physical 3D thing out of it. So I definitely had that in my blood from him. My dad won't mind me saying that he's not a terribly creative person. So it was definitely on my mum's side of the family. Mum was quite arts and crafts. So then ended up studying architecture. Loved the actual studying of architecture, loved studio environments, being around other students, like just such a cool creative space to be in. And you're all fighting the same sort of shitstorm. Like it's hard, like especially in Glasgow, it was hard. Tutors were tough.
I've heard that.
It was a harsh learning environment, but you grow up pretty fast. You had to get used to presenting your work like immediately. You're not in school anymore. You need to get up and talk in front of 40, 50, 60 people about your designs. So that really gave me, I feel, a really good start in life, Creatively, if you've got an idea, you have to be confident enough to be able to explain it to people, explain it simply, don't ramble.
Give you a lot of skills in all aspects.
Yeah. I think I was saying to either you guys or somebody else at Pechacucci the other night that of that class, I reckon less than a quarter are architects.
The same as
they've all ended up in different trades, different things, because it is a tough business. But the things that I remember, I love the studio environment. I love the learning from other people, and I love model making. Like always making quick concept models through to like pretty detailed scale models, things that moved and worked. And then after Glasgow, I went and studied in Eindhoven, which was again a totally different experience. So you've gone from working with harsh tutors, and it's like, we're going to drill this into you. This is the way you will learn. And if it's not up to standard, you're going to drop out or you're going to repeat. To Holland, where it was like full grown up, it felt like the closest thing to working in practice, right? Dealing with a boss. So the tutors were nearly like your bosses. So if you want to see them, you've got to book in an appointment. You have to turn up as a group. You've got to present your ideas. And then you get, like, it's not a studio learning environment where there was tons of tutors through a studio. You're having to really get organized with your week, and the facilities in the university were mind-blowing.
Same as Norway. Just amazing.
Yep. I think you were saying like the workshop in Norway, a similar thing in Eindhoven. Big 60s concrete building that they'd renovated, completely stripped top to bottom, put in like this amazing glazed facade, and in the basement,
state of the art,
was this workshop that just went on and on and on and on. And any models you want to make, materials all free.
Yep. Yeah, it was same as Norway.
I think we had materials all free, and if we wanted hardwoods, it was a one-off 50 krona fee. 50 krona is like £5.
Yeah.
I had no idea if I was going to use a hardwood, but I was like,
there's your 50 krona.
Yeah. And that money was just the admin. It was to cover someone's admin wage or admin time to order it. That was it.
Yeah.
It was just being able to take your idea and then actually make it and realise if that's going to actually work or not. These are how you...
Well, that's where you found furniture.
Yeah.
And you would never have been a furniture maker had it not been for
at Edinburgh, I was only able to do a sketch and like a tiny little model, but like you're never going to see the true potential of what you've designed.
Yeah.
You're also never going to learn how to join things properly so they stay together, how to build drawer runners so they stay properly. Because
you get the theory of it, but you don't get the practice.
Yeah. Yes. And you get the overall aesthetic and you can make it look good.
Yeah.
But you need something tangible at some point. You need something real at some point, and that's what a lot of it seems to be missing.
Yeah, like the hands-on skills.
If you were going back to uni now, or back into education now, or maybe the better question is, if your kids were interested in it, would you be looking for a university with hands-on skills?
I think ultimately it depends on how my kids, like my son's obviously interested in what I'm doing. Like you would have heard him at the
he wants to do what you do.
The exhibition the other day. Like he was giving a sales patter on my stuff. I'm like, what? Even if he, like I've thought about getting back into teaching. So I've tutored at uni. I've taught at the Victorian Woodworkers Association, but I really want to teach the art of creativity and how you apply that to designing things.
Right.
So I want my son to learn how to make furniture, how to be creative with his hands. If he's never makes another piece of furniture in his life after that, I don't care. He's learned those skills.
They're really important skills.
Yeah. Teaching patience, teaching how you take an idea from a sketch to a 3D form and all these kind of things. I think you can apply across so many other industries. Like furniture is a tough gig to make money out of. Architecture is tough. Any creative industry is a tough gig to make money out of. But I think teaching discipline through creative process is something that is totally invaluable. Yeah. And it's probably like with tech, it's only going to get worse, you know? Like I've noticed a change in my kids from when we moved from the city, and, you know, they'd be complaining about, you know, I want to watch TV, and now they want to go outside and like experience the bush, like, dig in the garden, look at the animals, look at the birds. They know all the birds' names, stuff like that. So, I would, like, the university experience to me was probably some of the best years of my life, and the friends and the networks that you make at it. You can't get that anywhere else. You don't get it in the workplace, I don't think.
I agree. Like our course, like it was a good group of people, and like socialising, and you know, like it's good skills to be learnt there. Yeah,
the design thinking skills are really important.
Yeah,
like I've said it a million times on the podcast. The engineers I used to employ, I looked for product designers because you can teach them mechanical engineering, but I was looking for guys that knew how to take a big problem, break it down into multiple little problems, and creatively work their way through each of those problems. That's the really important bit. The concern is the education establishments not having somewhere to manifest those skills in a physical way, because a lot of people do want to do physical stuff. And I think there's also a massive portion of people that don't realise they want to do physical stuff. Like I remember making that side table, and you completely fell in love with furniture there and then. It was like, oh wait, this is a real thing that we need to try and borrow a car off someone to get it dropped off. Like it's a real thing at that point, right? It's not just this computer render. And that's where we might all have it wrong.
It's quite exciting though, taking a sketch and actually making something.
So that's kind of my intention here is, like, obviously we're in my little garage at the minute, but the plan is to build a custom built workshop just on the other side here, and run classes to try to teach that small studio environment where people can learn off each other and critique off each other. I'll teach them my approach to design. They might take one element out of it, supply them with that information. That design school's out of reach for so many people financially, but just trying to provide a little element of that they can take back to their own shed and make their own pieces. Or if they want to make it with me, then we can talk about that. But yeah, it's something that I've always enjoyed, like proving people wrong. Like when somebody comes to me and says, oh, you know, I don't have a creative bone in my body. I'm like, I can teach you creativity. Like you just have to relax into it and accept that the first 10 things you design are going to be crap. Like, so design it 100 times and I can teach you how you will think for yourself and bounce ideas off other people, and you'll end up with something that is legible.
That's really interesting, because I always used to employ the product designers on the basis that I don't think you can teach creativity. Yeah. But you think you can teach creativity?
100%. I think you just apply some really basic things to... Everybody's got eyes, right? Everybody, like, especially in art and furniture, everything's subjective. There is no one right way to do anything. So you've got tolerances to play with there. But then there's also things about like form and shadow and light. And it's a science. Like there's rules. So you can either choose to follow those rules and you're going to get a piece that looks like this and it looks fine. Or you can choose to break those rules. So for people that aren't comfortable working in those kind of ratios, just change it up. Like, there's a brilliant book called 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School. Can't remember the name of the author, but if you Google it, it's a best-selling book. And it's like just 101 pages with like a one-word sentence of something that he took out of architecture school. And you can apply it to so many different arts and crafts. And the things that really stuck with me were, if you want to make something tall, make it really tall. Like, break all the ratios. You know, if you want to make a cabinet that doesn't look like a piece of mass-produced furniture, make it like 100 mil wide and make it 3 meters tall and find a way of fixing it and find a client, like, and make it unusual. If you want to make it low, and like a lot of my pieces are low, like that Jaja table that I presented at Pechacucha, you know, it was supposed to look like an Aboriginal Dreamtime story where there's this swamp creature. So take things from, I don't know, from myths and legends, take things from instrument design. I look at a lot of chefs and things and the way they all have, you know, a fixed range of ingredients. They all make different food and the way they present it.
It's so true.
Like, you don't have to look at other furniture makers. So if you're not inspired by furniture, but you want to make furniture, like, there's other paths that you can look at, sculptors and... but no, I'm a firm believer of you can teach creativity. Same way you can teach accounting. Like, you know, it's a spreadsheet. It's got a set of rules to it.
I might have found something else I was wrong at. It's the thing you say, like, if you want to make something tall, make it really tall. Like your Jaja table reminded me exactly of it, because it's like low and wide and it has stance. Yeah. Because that's very akin to like the concept car world. Like if you're going to do like a SEMA Motor Show car, you make it on the floor low and as wide as possible. You'll put like 4-inch arches either side and space it right out. Yeah. And that's probably it, isn't it? It's so people are like, oh, that's a bit different.
And it obviously depends on the type of furniture. Like some things, like a seat, you know, there's practical proportions to it. But the second you're doing a coffee table, or a particular type of cabinet, you know, maybe the client wants the cabinet designed around a particular object. That's quite often what I do with clients. I'll say, you know, I had one client last year, I redid her kitchen, and she's a ceramicist. And she wanted the end of the island benches filled in with shelves of different sizes, and we scaled them to fit particular pieces of ceramics that she had collected from around the world. And I like things like that, where you have a fixed object that is basically setting off the brief for the piece. That's not going to date. Like, it's not a piece of technology that, you know, in 5 years' time it's gone from being that size to that size. But it's something that the client values. Their family probably value it, and, you know, it gets inherited down the line, and the piece still makes sense.
Is that the architecture thing? Because you're given a set size plot that has, you know, the sun comes from a certain direction. It has a certain ground grading going on.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and like furniture obviously has to fit a room.
Yeah.
Some of my pieces have gone into like enormous, like cavernous spaces, and I'm like, well, they've got to be a certain size so they don't get lost in it. But yeah, there probably is a bit of that.
Yeah. Is it harder to design for you for a cavernous space than it is for a smaller space?
Yeah.
Is it?
I reckon.
Too much freedom?
Like my entire adult life has been spent in small apartments and small townhouses. So I was always designing furniture based around small proportions. Could it be multi-purpose?
Right.
Like I said, that being my first piece of furniture, the dimensions of that were scaled off, trying to fit it into the Mini that I owned at the time. And that was the longest piece you could fit with the front passenger seat folded forward.
So anyone around the world that's bought one of those off you in the past 12 years, it fits in a Mini, and that's why.
Mini Cooper S, it'll fit in it.
But a lot of cars are quite small, so they, it's a good thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
Yeah. And because I was making in Melbourne at the start, like a lot of my pieces were ending up in apartments. So you got to think about the size of the lift to get it up, swing angles to get it in through doors and stuff. So yeah, small pieces were always what I enjoyed making.
And these are the things consumers need to be educated on when it comes to design time. These are all the intangibles you don't see that have to happen. In some cases are more important than the piece of furniture itself. Because if you can't get it in, the piece of furniture doesn't work.
Yeah.
How do we better educate consumers as makers, and for other makers listening to this, how do we all better educate consumers as to what goes into it?
The example I would give would be things like the exhibition we just did on the weekend, like Craft Lab and stuff.
All right, okay.
So having the opportunity to actually talk to people, you might put it up on a website or something, and it might be in text format. Not everyone's going to read it. At Craft Lab, I had the star map table, the dish.
Yep.
And then I had a piece that I was working on, sort of putting the brass into it. And a lot of people couldn't see the connection. They're thinking I'm making different things. And I'm like, oh no, this becomes this. And they're like, oh,
then they can see like, whoa, that's a lot.
So you got to glue every single one of those in, hammer them in, plot it out, flush trim it, sand it. I'm like, yeah. Oh, we thought it was just like a little vinyl transfer that was just stuck onto the wood. I'm
that's
like, no.
amazing, right?
So
but see, for us that are all so close to that, you would think, why would you ever think that's a vinyl transfer? Of course that's that. And I wonder if that's a lot of the onus that we as creatives need to take, is we are so close to it, you need to think about someone who's so far removed from it. How do you communicate that with them?
And unless you have like, I don't know, a market research team behind you, like sort of doing focus groups, how do you ever know that? Unless you go to an exhibition and actually get that verbal feedback. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Like with Instagram and social media, the majority of posts that I share will be the making process.
Yeah, I think it's really important.
I'll put up some like finished beauty shots and things, but it'll generally be the making process. I'll use it to show the clients via my Instagram and get the clients to engage on the Instagram, saying, oh, I can't wait to get the piece or whatever. But I don't really make sales through my Instagram. I mean, I've probably 85% of my followers on Instagram are furniture makers.
Yeah, just following what you
And that's common. The more people we speak to, their main followers are people that are just like casually interested or in the same industry.
Yeah, but that's the best thing about Instagram for me.
Yeah.
Like the network that it creates, like the access to other makers that it's given me in other countries and in Melbourne. And like when I first moved to Ballarat, I knew nobody here. I'm like, anybody give me a lift for the, need a hand for this table saw? And 2 people are like, yeah, no problem, I'll be there this afternoon.
That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Neil.
Yeah. Well, that's how we found you.
Yeah.
5 years ago, that's how we found you.
Yeah.
So that's still how we find the majority of our makers. And again, for any makers listening, that it's not the fancy finish shots, it's when they inject their personality in it. They show you them making stuff. Yeah. They show you them doing something wrong. That's the big one.
Yeah. I showed
humility.
a few good mistakes. And I showed a mistake on that, again, I don't know if it's in frame, but that clover table that I did for
the one that's up there.
The clover shaped legs. So that was one of the toughest jobs I've done, like the technicality and getting the legs to penetrate through the tabletop, all the other technical things that had to happen in the frame to keep the table from twisting. It was done in 3 months with rough sawn timber that had come from the bottom of a lake. Yeah. some of it wasn't kiln dried properly. Keep moving, keep twisting. It was over summer. So the heat differences in the workshop were absolutely incredible.
All things people that are buying it don't think about.
Yeah. And just to add another layer of stress, the timber was leatherwood, which you can't commercially mill anymore. So the only source of it is either trees that come down in a storm or from the bottom of this lake. So I got a big batch of it all rough sawn from the timber mill in Tassie. And then you start to dress the timber and you're like, oh no, that's myrtle. So what I think, I've got 30% more timber than I need, which is generally on a tricky job, I'll always allow myself 30% extra to allow me to pick through, grade, make sure I'm getting the best pieces. So that 30% has suddenly become 5%. I'm like, oh, I really don't have much timber left over. And then got the legs machined. The guys that did the legs like butter up in Castlemaine. Again, another company that relocated from Melbourne to regional Victoria and running a business. Very successful. They did all the milling of it. All right, the project's going great. I got the underframe of the table assembled, and I was having to route a channel. I was putting dominoes in to connect the corner frame, and it was just the end of a day. I was exhausted, and I put it through the wrong side. So the outside of the, like, oh no, I don't got any more timber left. I can't remake that bit. And the exhibition was at that stage. It was being photographed the next week, and the exhibition was the week after. I'm like, if you heard some of the language that came out of my mouth that night, I
can just imagine the emotions.
Yeah. And we just had, what age was he? He was probably 8 months old. So I've got my wife going, where are you, dinner time? And I'm like, oh God, I'm just staring at this table going, oh no, do I call the architect? Do I call the timber yard? I was like, no, right, think about it. There's a way to fix it. And I ended up having to create a router jig to get the router to sit at the angle, and routed an entire strip out the whole way long. It was probably 3 meter long. And then I inlaid like a strip that I had fortunately kept as an offcut that was like lying on the floor of the workshop. Like if I tidied my workshop the night before, that would have ended up being burnt.
Oh my goodness.
So it's just this tiny strip, and I put a little taper on it and glued it in, flush trimmed it and sanded it, and it
saved the day.
Nobody would ever know. Oh wow. And I was like, do I share that on Instagram? Like, is the client gonna know? And I'm like, you know what, let's put it up on Instagram. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, I've been there too. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So yeah, your mistakes and how you recover from them, and that all just comes from experience.
Yeah.
I've never had to, like, halfway through a piece, just jettison it and go, right, start again. Like, it's always about knowing how to fix your mistakes. Yeah.
That's really important stuff for people, especially starting out, because it'd be so easy to just get down that rabbit hole and just sink as, oh, I've messed this one up.
There's always a way.
I'm not good enough, you know, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing.
Failure's part of it, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's born knowing how to make furniture, and there's not really any good institutions that I'm aware of. In fact, I'll take that back. There is no institutions that will teach you how to be the perfect furniture maker.
There's no every single piece of my furniture has mistakes on it. But the mistakes that only I'll know, like client would never know it. Most furniture makers, when they look at it, wouldn't know it, but it'll be something within the piece. It might be hidden by a glue up or something, but there's no flawless piece of furniture. It just doesn't exist. Yeah.
It doesn't exist in mass manufacture either, by the way.
No.
So, and Kate will attest to this, because you're the kind of person that struggles with it, and there'll be loads of people listening to this. Perfection, how do you deal with that? Because everyone wants their pieces to be perfect when they leave, right? Where do you set the bar for perfection?
Where do you stop?
Probably a bad person to talk to about that. I wouldn't say I'm OCD, but I definitely have what I would consider to be the level, maybe not perfection, but what I consider the most important thing is that the design is right.
Right.
So the design needs to be perfect.
Right.
And I can modify that and spend hours on that in a computer, in a sketchbook, and models. And once I'm happy with that and locked into that, it's like, right, I'm going to make it the best piece that I can. I'm going to select the best bits of timber that I can find. I'm going to make sure there's grain matching, and the piece looks consistent and it's well made. But I allow myself to make mistakes within the process of making. Whereas if I make a mistake within the process of design, then that's when I'm annoyed at myself.
Yeah. I had this discussion with my boss at the time, Dave Watkins, great special effects supervisor that I worked for a long time, the majority of my special effects career. And we had this discussion after my first film, because design in the special effects world was quite new when I started. And it used to be like, get it in the design office, get it out the design office as quick as possible, and we'll make it work in the workshop. And he was really good at trusting, very young at the time, like trusting me is like, we need to flip that round.
Yeah.
And as a result, things were coming out in the totality way quicker. We might spend twice the time in the design office, but they would spend a quarter of the time in the workshop.
Yeah.
Design is so important to not have to fudge your way through in the physicality of it. And I think a lot of that's because of the knock-on effects as well. Like if you get 10-stage design process, if 1 through 10, if you get stage 3 wrong, it knocks on to 4, 5, 6. Like it
compounds. Yeah,
it compounds. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Well, when I worked for a company in London doing furniture similar to my kids' furniture, but it was like adult furniture. It's all CNC cut and whatever. And the design files had never changed, and I was like, I'm having to hammer, like.
Really?
And I was like,
tab and slot stuff.
This is ridiculous.
Just go back and change the.
But it just never did, and I was so frustrated all the time. It's like I'm having to spend twice as long on this when you could easily, at the design sheet, just change it.
But how madness is that when you've got the CAD guys in house and the machine in house? They're not bought in components. Like it costs nothing to change it.
Yeah.
And it's such a small change.
It's like, that's why you just want to work for yourself, because then you can make.
You can just do it over.
You've got the control of that.
But a lot of my designs change, like that piece that I've been making for 16 years or whatever. It's changed proportion, it's changed width, it's changed the way in which I make it. Like the jigs that are up there have changed several times. Other pieces have changed because of just standardized lengths and things of timber. Like, a 2.4 meter length is kind of fairly standard. So I'll be like, if I shrink that piece by 15 mil, I'm able to get another piece out of that 2.4.
Right.
Therefore, it's reducing waste, it's reducing cost to the client. Like, I don't have to get rid of the waste, like all those kind of things.
And are they changes that usually come up in the design aspect or in the building aspect?
Sometimes, but sometimes you catch them at the design stage, and other times you catch them at the building stage, and you're like,
yeah. But that's what iteration's all about, right?
That's when I'm annoyed at myself.
Right.
Because I have, like, this. I'm a big fan of tactile design, sketching. Yeah. Like I was saying in Pechacucha, like the first thing my clients will see is a sketch, because I don't want to give them a finalized CAD rendering and they're like, right, it's done, it's going to look like that. I still want room to move in it, whether it's changing the types of timbers or changing the way the wood's joined together, the details in it, and I find a sketch allows me to do that. So yeah, it's always the start is that tactile form of design, and then I go through to CAD and everything's modeled in 3D. It spits out cut lists. So from that 3D model, if the client says I want to make it 50 mil longer, stretch it, cut list update. So I'm a big fan of technology, but I believe that in an early design stage, technology shouldn't really play a part in it.
I'm of the same opinion. Even designing big mechanical rigs, I'll start with a sketch. And I'm doing, or was doing, like hardcore mechanical engineering, right? Yeah. But you don't have the flexibility when you're on CAD.
Yep.
Do you buy into this, that this whole, like, you hear it kind of thrown around a bit, that CAD takes away from the traditional furniture making?
I think a piece that's fully designed in CAD, I can usually pick it.
Yep.
But I don't know, like everybody's got different approaches. The only thing that annoys me is the people that say AI is going to replace furniture designers. No. I'm like, I don't believe it can. And I know that's really, like, some people will say it's naive. Like the photographers that said, iPhones will never replace SLR cameras, and now.
Yeah.
But I think there's something about the human experience and interaction with an object. I don't think a computer currently is smart enough to learn that. And there will always be room for human ingenuity.
Yeah.
Like, I think the people that start designing pieces in AI are onto a losing streak. Like,
But I don't know what AI will become in 10, 5, 10, 15 years, 5, 10, 15 months.
Yeah.
But now it is just a library of everything we've ever learned.
Yeah.
We're still the driving factor.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of it anyway. I'm not massive in the space, so I don't know.
A library of everything we've learnt and 12-fingered people.
Yeah.
So, like, there will be things that ironed out in it, but I still think there will always be a market for people to want other people's ideas. And the ideas aren't born in a computer, they're born in a workshop.
Yeah.
I believe that.
It'll be a niche market, but it'll always be there.
Is that more beneficial for us as makers and creatives?
Probably.
I think it could be.
It may support fewer of us, but it'll encourage better work. Yes. Like, I always think a lot of the better makers, the people that have unique designs, unique ideas, are the ones that tend to survive, so long as they know how to run a business, which, like, it's a tricky thing to manage both. But yeah, I think it's probably a better thing.
How did you learn to do the tricky thing that is managed both?
I wouldn't say that I'm a master of it, to be honest. Like, I've generally always subsidized my income with other things, like whether it be doing work for other makers or hobbyists, like dress and timber, stuff you will never see me mention on Instagram.
Yep.
So this is an insight. I've had side hustle jobs working in marketing, social media, all those kind of things. Never talk about them. Yeah. Selling retro football shirts, I was telling you. So there's always been things that are kind of unrelated to my design. My design thing is mine. And then that allows me to do that. And there'll be times in the year where you're quiet, you know, and you do have to rely on those, even when you're a full-time maker. Like, there was times during COVID where I had a serious wait list for the first time ever, and I'm like, oh, I've made it.
Yeah.
And then a year later, you're like, you're watching, oh, this job's going to finish in 2 weeks. I've got nothing else to do after that. So it's just about flexibility, really. And managing cash flow is obviously the tricky thing.
That is a tricky thing.
So for me, the idea of now moving here where I don't have a monthly rent is great. Like, obviously that changes your cash flow structure. And then looking at things like teaching as being another income stream, a steadier thing.
Do you not think that's the beauty of being creative, though, is that you can have all these...
Probably, yeah.
That we're trying
I'd say some creatives are still like, this is the one path and I will dedicate every waking second to this.
Yep. And I admire those so much.
100%, like that dedication, but like, I've got a family.
Yeah.
I've got other interests as well. Like, again, probably the fact that my grandfather was my inspiration. You know, he was building, designing, architecture, furniture, all of that at once. And he was never an absent grandparent.
Yeah.
So like, you can do it.
You can do it.
Yeah.
We've kind of went through this switch. 18 months ago, I obviously came on full time. Before that, I was working film. Probably 12 months ago, we decided, like I cleared some of my back design contracts. I had one that I finished off maybe 4 or 5 months ago, which was just like the odd bits and bobs. And we were like laser focused on this one thing, which is where we are now, just like one thing. But I'm not against if someone phones and's like, hey, we need this effects rig designed, or we need that. I'm not against taking that on. Why would I not? Why would you not? David Bond, Lucky Bee Design, sign writer out in Waco, Texas, we sat down with last year. Like, through COVID and through, like, people weren't, he had a massive wait list. People weren't getting shop signs sign written because no one was opening them. Right? They were closing down, or quite the opposite. He went and bought chickens for the Texas border because people were buying chickens to get eggs, but not realising they had to rear them for, it's like 12 to 14 weeks or something. You have to rear them before they'll lay. So he went down to the Mexican border, bought chickens.
Forward thinking,
and then brought them because he's a creative person. Like, it's, and I think the message there to any other creatives listening is, you see the flashy highlight reel on Instagram. It looks like they're doing that all the time, full time. Don't be scared to pick up other work and do something else.
Never.
As long as it keeps that dream alive, you're doing something right.
And sometimes it being totally unrelated to the field that you're in is nearly better. Gives you that mental space away from it. Like if it's hospitality work or something like that, it's like you just switch from one, switch to the other.
You can't be scared of doing that. You can't, because you never know what's coming.
No.
You never know what's coming.
No.
that other thing might inspire you to do something else.
Yeah, it
or
could
you might,
absolutely.
or you might meet a contact there,
Exactly.
like talking to someone that leads to something else, like as
Networking
opposed to
is
being
so important as well.
a one-person maker in your workshop, relying on social media leads or website clicks to provide sales. But maybe you do meet somebody in another environment that sparks your business.
Yeah, we get so much out of travelling.
Yeah,
I must say the two, certainly the first 6 week States we were last year, and then we're going to be here for 5 to 6 weeks working our way through Oz. We get so much from being on the road.
yeah,
You can organise as many. In fact, there was someone that wanted to chat to us that we're going to go meet tomorrow morning when we ship out of here. That they were like, "Oh, we could sort out a Zoom call." I was like, "I'd love to just do it face to face, please."
yeah.
I would love to do it.
You get the
face-to-face.
opportunity, why not?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's silly not to.
How does that work with you being further out now? Do you think people will still come?
I don't know. I'll let you know in
Yeah.
a year's
when
time.
you know.
Like
There's something nice about it though, being
having a bit of space. Yeah. Like socially, like our friendship circles, we now see more of them than we did in Melbourne. Like they've got kids.
Yeah.
So when you see them in Melbourne, you know, it might be for lunch or something. The kids are rushing around and knocking things over, and you never actually get to concentrate with your friends.
Yeah.
And now they come up and they stay here,
Yeah. Right.
and you actually get to see them and spend proper time with them over the course of a weekend, rather than the course of an hour's distracting lunch.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm hoping that the client experience is fairly similar, and the idea of running design workshops,
Yep.
potentially offering the opportunity for people to come and stay here.
it's what a lot, you know. Not
Like,
few people
That's a
do
really
that.
good income that people that we've noticed more and
It's
more
like a
and more
retreat
people have done.
almost. Like you
Yeah.
stay and you learn.
and they can bounce ideas off me. Like, I want other people to succeed. Like,
Yeah, of course.
I don't like the more good bespoke furniture makers that there are that run their business sustainably, it benefits everyone.
Rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah, it's like that the whole thing. You know, the tire shops are always located opposite each other.
Yeah.
They all survive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact, that's a really good point. When that tyre shop we went to in the States when we rented the car, I had to phone, it was an enterprise car, I had to phone them again to double check what tyre shop it was because there was like 3 options. I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
They do all survive.
yeah, yeah,
And then there's usually an oil shop next to it with another oil shop next to that, right?
yeah.
That's a really good point.
So I know it's a bit more kind of lone wolfy out here, and it's like surrounded by farmland and stuff. But the idea that being in Ballarat and being surrounded by other creative makers is still a useful thing, as opposed to being 100 kilometers out in the middle of nowhere, like still having network.
And would you rent shop space to other makers that wanted it?
No, probably not. I don't think.
Yeah.
I like the idea of taking people who are on either the start of their journey to become professional makers, or people that just have an interest and want to make one piece. You know, like.
Why do you think you're so passionate about that? Because you brought it up quite a lot about the teaching side. Is it something you lacked?
No, I don't think so. Like I had very good teachers at school. Like in hindsight, doing architecture, we were driven maths, physics, like subjects that I was good at, but I didn't enjoy. Like design, technology and arts were the ones that I really wanted to do, and I think they provide you with a much better grounding to go and into architecture school than doing maths and physics. Like. I can't remember the first time I used the calculator in uni. I can't remember the last time I used it in office. You know, you're in a computer. Everything's been done. Like especially as CAD develops, it's all going to be scripted, and like you have to do very little of actual maths and physics. But no, it was probably being in a studio environment and learning from other people, and I always thrived in that. And I think. Yeah, no, it's so
Just
inaccessible
being able to provide
here.
that to somebody else is
Yeah, and not necessarily being the teacher, but being able to provide people with the tools to teach each other and like
collaborative
as a
thing.
group.
Yeah. No, I like it.
That's pretty cool.
That's. I know I was always fortunate to have really, really good tutors and teachers, and the tutor at Melbourne Uni, the master's course. There was a furniture design element, which is where I designed that piece.
Okay.
And it was old school, proper old school. Hamish Hill was the tutor. Anybody that went through that program, you know, will have a wry smile and have brilliant memories of him. And, you know, it was kind of like that Glasgow thing. If it's shit, you're going to be told it.
Yeah.
but he'll help you. Like, it's never like you're abandoned. And now that class has morphed into something just world-class furniture design.
Really?
Adam Markowitz and a couple of other makers do the teaching there. It's called X Lab, and it's like high-tech furniture design by architects. And I'm pretty sure it's still the most popular, like, subscribed course at the architecture department.
It's important to get people that have actually done teaching. Yeah. One of the big issues we had at uni, and I know a lot of people have had the same, is it's lifelong academics doing the teaching.
Yeah.
Not actual people that have made it.
That whole nonsense thing, if you can't do, you teach.
Teach, yeah.
Like, I think it's pretty unfair, but at the same time, I think you need to have seen some of the successes and failures from real life environments, like to really know how to guide students a lot of the time.
Yeah, you have to. I've done this. I've made this mistake. That's how you know it.
Yeah.
So what's next? We're in this new space.
Yeah.
A little bit outside Ballarat.
Yeah.
You're still making furniture. You're still doing some of your classic designs as well as pushing new. What's next?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know how it's going to go, to be honest. Like, I definitely want to get the teaching off the ground and have that maybe occupying 30-40% of my week. Then have custom commissions, doing another 40%, and then doing 20% just self-commissioned work for exhibitions and things. Like, I always love doing self-commissioned work.
Right.
Like most makers out there, you're your own worst client a lot of the time. But at the same time, like, it's something that I've learned in the last probably 3-4 years, is not everybody has seen your work. So that constant pressure to do new stuff all the time, like, you have to take it off yourself. Like, for the Ballarat, for the craft lab, I was like, I've got no time to make another piece. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it into spending my time on really good marketing material. And I'm going to present these pieces that I know work, that I know how much they cost to make, the time they take to make, the different material options. I have that absolutely nailed down. Why would I bring in a new piece that I'm still trying to sort of resolve?
Yeah.
And try to
Everybody
sell
in
that.
that room has probably never seen your work before.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
You're so right. You're so
and you
right.
go to Melbourne, and I've got a decent enough social media following and stuff, and a lot of furniture makers know my stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, 98% of people will have never seen it before. Yeah. So, I think trying to promote my existing body of work is still something that I'm getting better at.
Good.
Yeah.
It's so easy to the next shiny object.
Yeah. Yeah.
We fall for love.
But you've said it a few times, like, content, you don't really need to create new content. It's just like,
a
lot of people haven't seen the content that you've already shared.
Yeah, and it's allowed me to enjoy other people's work a lot more as well. Like, Melbourne Design Week's on this week. Some of the pieces at it are just incredible. But I haven't felt pressurized. I don't know whether it's related to having family and not having as much free time and just sitting in a workshop going, right, I've got to make something. But being able to look at other people's work going, wow, that's amazing. That's great. But I've still got these old pieces that are great and people still buy them. So
yeah. So just tell more people about that.
Yeah.
We talked about this a lot. Like, what do we do? Interim copies, or do we do a yearly, like, muckle book of, like, the best of the best, or do we introduce something else? We're like, oh wait, not enough people know that the quarterly publication exists.
Yeah.
Let's just concentrate on that until we're at, and set a number that, like, that's that at critical mass, and then we'll think about adding new things. It is really easy to do.
Yeah.
And there'll be loads of people listening to this that are like, yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your marketing. You took a different approach to that this time round.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, so Lanny, my wife, like, you guys were in depth about about marketing and strategy and stuff. So that's her background. So she had always pushed me on making sure that the story matches the work. And anybody wants to go and listen to my podcast, we're doing a bit of cross promotion. The Shop Stool podcast, we interviewed her and she gave an hour-long chat about how
We'll put the link in
how makers can actually promote themselves. So yeah, for the first few years, in fact, for a lot of years, it was always me referring to myself as they. And like I'd put myself behind a brand, which was quite an intentional thing. Like I didn't want to be Bryan Cush furniture maker. Like I saw the value in trying to generate a brand. I pushed ads on Instagram, on Google, on Facebook, and I never felt as though I got the returns from them. I'd get clicks, and you'd see traffic go up. But then when I'd get an inquiry on a job, I'd always be like, well, how did you find me? And they'd be like, oh, we saw you at that exhibition 2 years ago.
Okay.
So for me, it was more about trying to put my work in front of other people's eyes in a physical sense, much like you guys have done with, creating a publication. It's not an ebook.
Yeah.
So I took basically my entire annual marketing budget, in fact, probably a couple of years worth of marketing budget, and printed a whole load of A5 folios, spent money on getting the right paper stock, got a graphic designer. I do most of my own graphic design on my website. I do all my graphic design now, but for that folio, I was like, right, this needs to be nailed, and I don't have the time to do it.
First impressions and all.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, right, can I get all these A5 folios done? And I sent them to pretty much every architect and interior designer with a handwritten note and trying to create relationships. And like, I'm sure a lot of them just ended up in a bin or a trade library or something like that. But I definitely got payback on that investment by a factor of 10.
Wow.
Like,
it's a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, just the idea of having something that's staying with someone as opposed to being in a bookmark and a browser and it's gone.
Let's be honest, you don't ever go back, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was that thing that, I think it was a Sears catalogue in America, like 1950s, when they're, trying to get their work out to people. Was it Sears or was it a home builder? I can't remember. But their whole idea was that, again, this is dating it, so nobody shoot the messenger. When housewives were cleaning the house, the books were stacked large to small. Okay. So they made their brochure small. So it ended up on the top of the stack rather than buried at the bottom. So that was one of the things that drove me to do an A6, more pages rather than a larger folio.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, reduce the postage cost, and it's hopefully going to remain at the top of the stack on a desk.
That's clever.
I do remember when we done our branding course at university, if you're putting your portfolio out to people says make it an odd size.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I done all mine's in, I don't even know if it's a format anymore, DL.
DL,
it's that weird format. Yeah, I done mine's in that.
But it's like magazines, you make them smaller so that the front of the pile rather than the back.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Ours is just off of A4 size and just off of legal letter size.
Yeah.
It's like a just squinty size that doesn't sit normally.
Yeah.
Purposefully.
Yeah.
There's a reason
for it. It's
not
it's that stack and it goes in and it's that different.
Yeah. It's, if everyone else is sitting here, if everyone else is US letter, ours sits just that wee bit. It breaks the line, right?
And you were saying as well about changing the layout of the cover, so that.
Yeah, so it goes down to all those things, isn't it? Especially in the physical side of it. We've recently got a big deal with Barnes & Noble. It's going to sit on the shelf. We've got much more news people distributing us now. It's D2C and we still do good numbers direct to consumer, but we've got a lot of wholesale. So now we're like, do we need to change something up a little bit about the front cover so it sits better there? I was looking late in the night on foiled letters on the front of it. Do we do something that just makes it jump off the shelf more?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. But that's the fun thing of creating a product, because we are product designers, so this magazine had to be a product that somebody wants to keep and, treasure sort of thing. So it's interesting, the design changes you go through as you get more experience in the space, because at first you're like,
we've got no publishing experience.
No.
And copy to copy, people won't really notice the difference, but if you compare first edition, edition 10, you look at them side by side, you're like, Jesus, the progress.
Yeah.
And sometimes they might not always notice that, but we notice the changes that are happening, and it's fun.
We notice it, and the big move to quarterly for us, people seem to love it. We get loads of, there has been the odd one, it's I really liked it, it was a big thick book, but then more people like the fact that they don't have to pay through the nose for shipping.
Yeah.
And actually we put out, like if you put a year's worth of the old ones together versus a year's worth of the new ones together, it's considerably more pages.
Yeah.
It's like 100 more pages a year, 80 to 100 more pages a year.
Yeah.
So you get more, but we've circumnavigated the shipping. There's loads you can do in your products to do stuff like that.
But you only know that through the experience of doing.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing that you could have ever just landed on for the first iteration.
And it's no different to you saying taking 15 mil off the length of something means you get way better results on it, right?
Yeah.
The constant iteration is kind of where the fun is. It's the product. We used to say this quite a lot in product design. Like, I don't think I was ever a good product designer. I was a good product developer, which then led me to be a good engineer because I could develop the problem. I'd look at how someone else does it first. Like, I'm not a great initial ideas person, but I can pull loads of ideas together, and that seems to pay dividends.
Yep. But so, like, getting back to the marketing thing of like how I've changed the way I market, I definitely put myself more to the front of the business. Like, I use myself in photographs. I'll change the they do this to I do this. I've changed the logo and the ident. Like this year I finally took the chisel off which Lanny had been on at me for years to do. She's like, it's too maker, you gotta go high end and all that kind of stuff. So like I put my piece on it, and again that takes, you know, a level of confidence that you only build up over years to go, right, this piece is good enough to represent my brand. Is
that you consider that your statement piece now?
I think so, yeah. It's, I mean, it was the first piece I did. Without it, I wouldn't have a company. I wouldn't be making furniture.
So it means something.
It means something to me, But I think it's quite a recognizable piece, like the form of it and stuff. Like it's quite hard to do a simple diagram of a piece and to know that that piece belongs to one maker, whereas I feel as though I can do that through that piece. But it's definitely through me putting myself forward more. So on Instagram, talking a bit more, doing stories where it's just me talking to camera, through EDMs and things like that. Like I said, I took my pricing off and put it behind a sign-up wall. And now I'm sending, like I try not to spam people, but I do like a quarterly newsletter. The open rate on it's really high. I get good engagement. People reply to it. Like, so
because they know it's behind.
Because they know it's me. It's from Bryan. It's not from a marketing consultant. It's just me writing it.
But we did the same, because at the start we were just behind the logo. It was just like, we are makers. There was no like Kate and Jack or whatever. But actually now that we are behind the brand, people want to connect more with it.
Yeah, because your Instagram logo is you guys, right? It's a photo of you two.
We get loads of replies to the email. Some of them are telling me I spelled stuff wrong.
I'm like, it's hilarious.
I'm like, that's the point. I'm a human being.
I was writing it at 2 a.m.
Which he does most of the time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, someone calls you out for saying you're, and I'm like, oh.
Thank you.
I missed an apostrophe on your, and I was like, but you opened it. And do you know what? And it was in the subject line. It was... it was like your
Jack.
weekly update or something. It was in the subject line, and I looked back and that had like a 72% open rate, over 4,500 people.
Just screenshot the metrics and just send it back.
And actually I'm like, should I start spelling stuff in the subject line wrong? Because more people opened it. Maybe it's the same thing as the smaller brochure. There's something about it that was obviously irking enough that people opened it. Maybe that's like the original clickbait, make a mistake. I like what you done about you were freaking out about it. You're like, I was like, that's how,
like, anyway.
It's like, it doesn't matter. Same with abandoned cart email. I've not had an abandoned cart flow set up for forever. I've set it up now. But I go through it maybe every month and I'm like, we don't have a lot of abandoned carts. We have a really high conversion rate, which is great. But I maybe had 20 to send the other day, and 4 or 5 of the people that I emailed was like, this is so cool that it's not a bot.
It's not an
automated bot. Like, of course we'll buy it.
Yeah.
Which was really good. I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's very time consuming. But there's a lot to be said for that.
You gain customers from that, so it is worth doing.
And you gain loyalty from that as well, I think, which is the important bit. Putting your prices behind an email list is important though.
Yeah.
I think that's quite clever and something a lot more people could do, because we got some advice a while back now. It was, who's the guy that does brand storytelling? He said it on a podcast. Remember that book you found?
Oh yeah.
Your Brand Story or Brand Storytelling. Great book. Donald Russell, I think, was the author. Don't know, need to check that. But one of his clips on Instagram was saying that he reckons an email address is worth $15.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Because you're not hidden by, like, you're not being hidden by an algorithm. Like, you're not at the mercy of Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or whatever.
It's exactly why we do a print publication.
You have their email address. It's very, very valuable.
Yep.
Like gold.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because you can speak to them.
Yeah.
And do you know what? If people unsubscribe from it, like,
Don't take it to heart like I
it doesn't
do.
matter.
It's hard not to take it to
Yeah, I
heart
know.
sometimes. You're like,
I don't care.
I really like that person.
I really don't care in the slightest. However, I have noticed a few of the makers have unsubscribed from the email list, so you won't be getting featured again in the future. Just to caveat it, if you unsubscribe... Nah, I actually don't care in the slightest. I think people get so many emails, like, I unsubscribe to loads.
Yeah.
I've definitely unsubscribed to some of the emails on... But what we do is there is a lot of the makers that we mark as like our close friends on Instagram, so you can train the algorithm that they always show you their stuff.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That does work well without clogging up your email box. We get so many emails. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's absolutely mental. It's mental. Or DMs as well, which is, I was talking about this the other night, wasn't it? I was like, I give way too many people my phone number. Like, if this company ever blows up and becomes massive, like, everyone's got my phone number. Because half the time on DMs, I'm like, go and just text me.
Yeah.
Like, put it in WhatsApp or something like that.
Yeah.
We've covered loads. Covered marketing. Covered. What would you do if you couldn't fail? If you knew you couldn't fail?
If I knew I couldn't fail?
What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail?
This is where your dreams come. Yeah, no, you're just share your dream.
Like, I don't know. Like, I'd probably do a bit more experimental work, like stuff that might not be structurally sound, and just
Wing it.
wing it. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, to be honest, like, it's such a cliche, but like, I'm kind of living my dream. Like, it's taken a long time to get to here, but the idea of having my own workshop and have my own space and not being at the mercy of anybody else, like, I can do what, so long as I'm still making an income and my business is alive, I can still survive. But
that's the important
it's a tough
bit,
question to answer.
Yeah. But the important bit is what you've just
do.
said, is like, you're not relying on anyone. You're living your dream, and yes, it can sound cliche, but that's the reality. That's all we want to do. We just want to kind of exist and not rely on anybody.
Yeah, and it's definitely, like, to me, my focus in life has obviously changed since having kids. Like, whereas before, I would obviously love the idea of inspiring other makers to sort of start their business. Whereas now I look at my kids and I'm like, I want them to feel inspired, whether it's something completely different from furniture, but the idea that they can sort of make their own path and follow it. And if it's not what they wanted to do, get out and do something else. Like, don't feel as though you've got to be stuck in the same career your whole life. You know, when you feel as though you've worked hard enough at it that it's not working for you back, like, get out and do something else and have the confidence to do it. Life is too short, and like, you get one chance. So.
Yeah, and what does success really look like?
Yeah,
I've battled with this a lot, and I'm still trying to work out, what does success really look like?
Is a 6-figure salary in a corporate job, like, is that success?
Yeah, just so you can spend it all at the weekend doing the stuff that you could be doing if you were just doing your own thing.
Yeah. So, yeah, inspiring my kids would probably, like, that's the dream.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I think you're already doing
It's a pretty noble dream. The little one's definitely going to tell you how to make furniture pretty soon.
Yeah.
You'll be giving me all the ideas.
He's calling me bossy. All right. Yeah,
Got one more question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Be gentler on yourself when you fail a bit more. Don't take it to heart so personally. I always kind of backed myself to a certain level. Like, when I knew that architecture wasn't for me, the conversation with my parents was tough. Like, they spent a lot of money and a lot of time backing me to study architecture. I'm like, no, this is not me, like, leaving it all behind. I've taken all these great things out of it. It's just the profession wasn't for me.
Just want to take a different route.
Yeah, but yeah, just be kinder to yourself and allow yourself to fail a bit better.
No, that's good.
Fail better. I like that.
Feel better. Probably don't bring a phone into a workshop. Yeah.
Fair.
Put some music on.
Yeah.
Work.
Yeah.
Don't have the distractions of Instagram and life. Like,
Buy printed magazines if you want something for the tea
Buy
room.
printed magazines. Like, it was a good one. Apparently, We Are Makers. Apparently, but yeah, I think you could learn a lot more efficiently than learning off YouTube. Going on your computer, you get a notification pop up. Going on your phone, whatever. Like, it's a distraction. Like, you'd be better going and doing. If I wanted to learn something, I would have been better going working for another maker one day a week, or going to a night class with a furniture maker, something like that.
Fair.
That would have been advice to my younger self. Yeah.
Amazing.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
It's been great.
So I need you to do an intro so I can flip it to the front after.
Yeah.
But just before we do that, if you could sit down with any other maker, you don't know who it is, what question would you ask them?
Start it here. You put me on the spot, Jack.
All right, that's a tough question. Which one piece of your work would you want to be around in 100 years' time, and why?
That's a good one.
Well done.
Which one piece of your work would you want to be around
If
in
you could
100
have
years and why?
That one surviving representation of your existence on Earth.
Yeah,
It's pretty grim, but
yeah. It's like the museum piece thing.
The museum piece, yeah.
Yeah.
And why would you want it? Why that piece?
Nice.
All right.
I like that one.
Yeah.
So I'm working on, for anyone that's wondering why I'm asking this question, because I'll be asking it probably for the next year. I want to set out a set of cards that we can all ask ourselves as makers to make better decisions in the making space, and that Kate and I can ask makers on the cuff. You know, so sometimes we only get a chance to meet a maker for like a coffee when we're travelling. Yeah, pick a card, let's go, and then we can put that out on our channels so more makers, like, they don't always have to be. I've got a love-hate relationship with podcasts. I absolutely love them. I hate the fact that a lot of them are this big like studio represented thing.
Yeah.
Some of them that are big productions I absolutely love, but the whole point in a podcast is we were detached from all that, and it could just be a conversation.
Yeah.
So I want to, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I like introducing more things, work out this set of cards that are makers' questions that they would have asked to themselves or other makers if they were to go back in time and ask themselves the first question when they started.
It's interesting to see how it evolves in that.
Yeah, but that's a good one. I like that one. That's a very strong start.
Okay. Good. Amazing.
Introduce yourself, because we never introduced you at the start.
Introduce myself to camera.
Yeah, go for it. Right down the barrel.
All right. My name's Bryan Cush. I'm a furniture designer maker, Irish born, but practicing in Ballarat, Australia.
And you are the Sawdust Bureau.
I'm Sawdust Bureau.
Hey, perfect. Dude, thanks so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome.
Thanks for visiting us.
Yeah.
in
I know.
Ballarat.
Well, Ballarat. Mate, we've had a great week in Ballarat. Ballarat's awesome.